Cool. So welcome to PyScript Fun. It is the 28th of September, 2023, for all you future archaeologists out there. The whole point of PyScript Fun is that it's just like you're at the water cooler or you're having lunch with someone and they go, hey, do you want to see something cool? I've hacked this together. And we're doing this sort of thing with PyScript. So we have all sorts of faces looking at me, and if you could just put your hand up, raise your hand in that kind of Zoomish sort of a way if you have a demo to give, and I will just call your name and you can give your demo, tell us about it, we might ask you questions, and then we'll go on to the next person. So could you do that in a kind of digital way rather than an actual real world way, because it just Zoom will keep them up. So Jeff's first off the mark. And then I know Łukasz has one and Andrea has one as well. Do we have anybody else who wants to show something? Nope. Okay. Last one for me is good. Okay, Andrea, you can go last. So Jeff, you're first in the queue. Matey, I'm looking forward to this. It's always good to see you do demos. Take it away.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay, Nicholas?
Perfect.
Amazing.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. First time from this computer. I'm glad it is working. So I have a two-parter demo to show today, but I think it will be quick. So let me share. Let me see if I can share my screen. Let's try this one. Built-in display, share. All right. Can you see the screen there?
Yes.
You might be able to see yourself, and if so, I apologize. So this is part one of the demo. This is an old thing that some of you have seen before, which is PyScript.recipes, which is a site I maintain for little snippets of code. Mostly the questions that I answer more than once on Stack Overflow, I try and stick into PyScript.recipes. How do you run code? How do you install Python packages in PyScript or Pyodide? And I try to cover both, and I'm working on adding the MicroPython section to this as well for the upcoming release. Not that much new here, other than I stole the materials MKDocs theme idea from Nicholas and the rest of the team who's been redoing the docs, rather than rolling this by hand, so it's a little bit more accessible and searchable for the next version. So that's the first thing, which I think most of you have seen before. Let me show you the second thing. So this is just a page from, how to get objects from Python to JavaScript in PyScript or in Pyodide, as you will. But if I go into the configuration for this page, which is running live, and I enable the MKDocs PyScript plugin, and I rebuild the page, we'll reload, we'll see that every code block that has Python in it now has an associated load button. And if I load it, it turns into what we used to call a REPL, like we're kind of a notebook cell, which is executable. So if I make this one actually do something visible and I run it, then after it's executed, we should see on screen the results of executing. Actually, I hit it twice there, so it's now executed twice. That could be anything else. I could say for I in range 5, print I, and execute, and so on. And we get an executable, notebook cell right in the browser there, much like we had before. So the goal of MKDocs PyScript is it's a MKDocs plugin that I'm authoring that essentially allows anyone who's building documentation with MKDocs to turn their Python code into executable cells just by installing that plugin from PyPI. That's the gist of it.
Jeff, I'm writing the docs right now. This is just like manna from heaven. This is just superb. I have a big cheesy grin on my face, as you can see. Any questions for Jeff, or comments, or kudos, or anything? Antonio, go for it, matey.
Well, I have a question and kudos, of course. Well, that's very nice. The question is, are you using PyREPL for this, or it's some custom-made thing?
So this is custom. It's essentially it's 60% of it is ripped from our previous PyREPL, and then some additional modifications to the code mirror on top of that. But it's not that dissimilar from what we had in PyScript Classic.
Mm-hmm. So it will work also with Next?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
good.
it will. And I think I don't know when Next has a Py cell or whatever we're calling it. I might just use that, or might do a slightly custom thing. But the same idea.
Yeah, we're still building the airplane as we're learning to fly, as the well-worn metaphor says. Fabio, do you have your hand up because you have a demo or because you want to ask Jeff a question?
A question, yes. Well, question/comment. The cell and eventually notebook was one of the first things I wanted to do next. So love to get your thoughts and, you know, pair and everything else on this. This is so cool. I'm saying this without knowing like the progress in the last 10 days. So if you already did the cells and notebook, great. Otherwise, that's something I will work next.
I don't think anyone, if someone's done it and they're hiding it in a branch, I would have stolen it for this. So, but I don't think we have yet.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah. One thing that occurs to me, Fabio, on that, and we'll cruise right along. My API is much simpler because I get to determine that every cell runs in a worker and it runs in its own worker and there's no shared state. Like I was like, we're doing the smallest possible face of a Pi cell. I think the hard part will be the, you know, what if you want to share, cross, reuse, like that kind of thing. But the interface was not super hard, so we should chat or come steal or whatever's good.
Yeah, but that starting from a simple state and building up is definitely a good approach. So this is perfect.
Awesome.
This is great, Jeff. Awesome. You're awesome. That was wonderful. As always. And you're in your tool shed by the looks of it.
I am,
which is really cool. So any more questions for Jeff? If not, Valerio, do you have your hands up because you've got a question?
Yeah, I have a question. That was amazing. Kudos to that. That was really nice. I was just wondering how much of that is Titan with MKDocs, or just like you happen to work with it, and incidentally you are integrating with it, or so. I guess my question is how much of it can be reused for other doc engines.
Yeah, it's a good question. Currently, it's built as an MKDocs plugin. It would be possible to reuse a good chunk of it for something else. There is also already a PyScript Sphinx plugin that one of the contributors on MyPy, I think, developed earlier this year. I think it's kind of gone quiet over there. But there's no reason we couldn't take it essentially is like looks for code blocks, and when it sees them in the rendered HTML, you know, run some JavaScript, adds the button, does the logic to initialize it. So porting that core to something else wouldn't be terribly hard, I don't think.
Wonderful. Yeah.
This would be wonderful to see on Read the Docs or something like that. You know, all of a sudden, everybody's code is runnable.
Yeah, and I should say for those, because I know my workers makes people's hearts flutter a little bit, although less than it did a few months ago. Andrea's mini COI script is what I'm using to enable workers sort of from anywhere. So in theory, I haven't tested, but in theory, this should work on GitHub Pages, should work on Read the Docs, we'll see, but.
Let's see. All right, Jeff, again, awesome. Everything you keep saying just makes it just a little bit more awesome, and that was just the little button on top. There we go. Okay, I'm looking at the time, and thank you very much, Jeff. Łukasz, you're next in the queue.
All right.
Let
me share the screen then. Where can I share this particular app? Here. Okay. All right, I clicked. Can you see it or no?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, cool. So there's this Python game competition that happens like for like 20 years now or something. It is very, very well known in the Python community, and I've known about it for a long time, but I've never took part. I never took part because it always just comes unexpectedly to me. It's both in March and September, which happen to be like busy months for me. So every time I just miss it. And this year, Glyph wrote me like and say like, "Hey, we should team up." Like, and I was excited to do this. And then I made music for him, like, you know, for the idea that he had. And then he didn't make a game. So I was a little upset because I was like, "Hey, he did all this music thing," and he's like, you know, and it's ready. It's you know, kind of I need to use it. And then I remembered like, well, like at EuroPython, I did a bunch of generative graphics things, and one of those things was. Like one of the examples was in PyScript, so I just worked on that and, you know, kind of made a simple game using PyScript. That is the May version of PyScript, so it's not PyScript Next. Technically, for PyWeek, it would be breaking the rules to actually use the September version because it wasn't out for at least 30 days before the competition. So yeah, right. So I used the May version. So yeah, so let's see. I cannot vouch for any quality, like, you know, kind of over a video on this, or how well I will be able to play when I show this. But it runs on like 120 FPS on my Chrome, which is like, you know, pretty good. All the logic is in PyScript. So let's see it in action, and then we can talk about it for a bit. Okay, I lost. All right. So yeah. So it's a game. You can see the collision cube right here. Like, you know, just to explain what happened, because sometimes it is not entirely clear that, like, yeah, you actually did touch, like, you know, an edge on the thing. So yeah, so it's a very classic kind of, like, you know, kind of tube chaser. There's a bunch of games like this. But yeah, like, the fun pieces for you is like, there's these FPS meter here, like 120 FPS. That's actually, like, you know, no lie, this is very quick. This console right here that says things to you, like, I can just print to it because that's the regular PyTerminal, which is actually pretty cool, because with HTML I could just put it in a place where it was, you know, nice to have. Like, I made this image, like, you know, very quick, and also just put it like there, like with HTML. So like, it is very, very nice, like, to make games like this. This uses Three.js, which is extremely powerful and mostly nice to use. It is frustrating to use when you are trying to find some concrete example of how to use it, because a lot of the examples online are for versions from previous years, which are to a large extent different from what you have today. Like, if in the JavaScript world, like, you know, backwards compatibility isn't really a concern. At least, you know, in my experience, like, they are very quick to move things around, and, you know, kind of to remove things, move it to a different package. Like, oh, this is no longer in core, this is some add-on, like, you have to install it differently, and rah, rah, rah. So there's been plenty of hiccups, like, to actually make this work, but, you know, kind of in the end, not a bad experience, not an awesome experience like writing yet, because debugging in this world, like, is mostly just having an exception that is like, okay, A is undefined in some minified JavaScript file, and you're like, well, but why? So you're trying to figure out why. So on the Python side, like, you're getting an object, and you're like, print this object, and it says square brackets object, and you're like, what's that? So, you know, kind of, it takes a while to actually find issues when they arise, and, you know, kind of, there are some that are Python tracebacks. So I love those, but many of the Python tracebacks, maybe that is better in Next, I don't know. Like, in classic PyScript, like, they mostly just show you, like, some kind of event loop like entry, and suddenly like you're like, okay, and it doesn't work, but it doesn't really show you the trace back on like where we are in the code. And the reason why is that the way this entire game works is you set up a scene, like, you know, like you have like the 3D objects in some space, like you draw it in a canvas, and then you just ask the JavaScript runtime like to like call this callback every time it needs an animation frame. So you're not actually running your application in the kind of traditional sense. Like it is just like a ton of callbacks being called like 60 times or like 120 times per second to actually, you know, like move things around so that the game progresses and it reacts to input and whatever. So like the tracebacks are also crazy because they just come from the middle of JavaScript. Yeah, so kind of would I do it again? Like, yeah, I will totally do this again, because the reason I actually learned this was to, you know, kind of make visualizations to the music I make. And like the fact that I did actually use the music I make for this, like it makes it kind of, you know, make sense to me, because I don't know, like if you could hear it or whatever, but, you know, kind of, yeah, like I spent some time to actually make it synchronized, because there's different clock domains in wall clock, like music playing and with, you know, kind of games, because if you would advance the logic of the game during the animation frame, it would advance depending on how fast your game is able to render, which is obviously invalid. So like you have to decouple this so that it actually synchronizes to the music somehow, and so on and so on. So yeah, like, you know, kind of I'll be doing like more of this, but I wish like in time we have access to web GL, which this is, or better yet, web GPU, like straight from PyScript, not through 3JS, because that also, like, you know, kind of requires people to really be at least a little familiar with JavaScript to use it. For me, that wasn't a problem. I was actually very happy to just be able to write the entire logic, like including math, computations, like everything that there is in Python, which is kind of fucking awesome because it's 120 FPS. But, you know, kind of still you need to read the API docs, like with whatever the JavaScript library has. And this can be a little mind-boggling. I started putting semicolons in my Python code, like after like enough of JavaScript exposure. So it's weird. Okay, I'll stop talking. Like you have questions.
Okay. I have a question, but first in the queue was Fabio. So Fabio, go for it.
First, let me say, holy shit, this is so cool. Really. And by the way, the music is exactly how I picture you driving your charger on a highway at night. We talked about this. You avoiding the raiders. It's basically you avoiding the blocks here. So cool.
Okay.
So I was going to ask really the stack, but I think you covered really well, and also a lot of the things we observe, as well as it's a ton of callbacks, and that's how the web world is, and it's different than our usual Python, etc. But one thing I would like to ask you, what you think we can make to basically make the experience better, or maybe we can take that as a post. You know, I'd love to talk with you as how can we create an API that it's easier for folks to actually bridge between 3JS and that type of application and, you know, PyScript.
So far already, like and this is why, like when we were talking about like, hey, you're doing this, you know, like new programming language plus you know, MicroPython plus Pyodide plus maybe Lua or whatever, like I was like, no, if we just focus on one. And the reason why is that Pyodide actually has the FFI ability to do a lot of those things with JavaScript that actually works. MicroPython has something that I couldn't get to work, and you know, kind of, and it's, you know, a lot of complications there. So I talked with Hood at EuroPython about some of those things. So I already understood that, for example, when you give a callback to JavaScript, you have to wrap it in create proxy. If you don't do this, like, you know, your function like your closure is going to disappear. Like the Python memory management is just going to clean it up before it gets called, right? So you need to know this, and Pyodite even like will warn you about this most times. Like it is unable to tell this every time. But also if you're sharing data with JavaScript, like most of the time it will automatically wrap things for you. But if the things are nested, you have to take care of this yourself with like the 2JS thing that it also comes from like Pyodide. So like if there was something that PyScript just has that is, kind of shared like in that, and it doesn't matter then if you're using MicroPython or Pyodide or, like PySpy or like Spy actually, right? Yeah, or whatever. Like that would be helpful. But better yet, like if some of those things would be kind of, done for you. For example, it is a little frustrating to me, and I understand the reason, but it's still frustrating where like to create new objects that are JavaScript objects, you have to just say like, like your class name dot new, and you create it like this, which is just ugly, and I just do the wrong thing all the fucking time. So when you do the wrong thing, Pyodite will say, no, you did it wrong. You should have done .new. So if you know what I should have done, just do it for me. Come on. So yeah, like it would just make more sense to me. I know historically why that was. Like like it is in theory possible for an object to have both APIs. It would be weird. But yeah, like there are some gotchas just because JavaScript is an FFI. Like in this case, so obviously it is foreign in many ways. But this foreign nature makes it surprising, like on top of what you're already trying to do. Like making a game is already, kind of an adventure, right? Like there's already a challenge there. And then like actually trying to figure out why when you're printing out an object, like once you're going to get like a nice Python wrapper, and once it's just square brackets object because it's a JavaScript object. Those things make it a little complicated. Like I don't want you to make an entire 3JS. 3JS is 10 years old. Like it's a huge library. Just look at it. Look at the examples there. Like it's just a full-time job for somebody just doing this. Even though having bindings for this, at least like official bindings, would already be awesome because it just looks so cool, right? Like it is very easy to make like things that are very impressive visually for PyScript, like kind of actually using 3JS.
Cool. Thank you. This is great feedback.
Yeah, definitely. Antonio, you have a question, matey?
Yes, I have a question about my favorite topic, which is error messages.
Yeah.
No, actually, more than a question is I'm asking if you have nice small examples of cases in which you would like better error messages, and you can share them with us. It's helpful because that's what we're doing right now for PyScript Next. So
okay, cool. So yeah, when I get to this, like I'll definitely have like my favorite list. Like most of the time, like and that was true. Like at PyWeek, like there was the pressure of time. So I mostly like when I actually solved something, I just moved on. Like so I no longer even remember like all the hoops that I was jumping through. But like there were quite a few. So it is not impossible to do. Like I did this in like essentially a day and a half. But kind of it's not for somebody who just first starts with PyScript. I had previous exposure and access to PyScript people to actually ask them questions before, like when I was like, I don't understand why this doesn't work.
But I'm putting a lot of effort trying to have a nice error message every time it makes sense. So yes, it's definitely good feedback.
Yeah, right. Cool.
Yeah.
But this links to what Fabio was talking about with Łukasz, as you'll see, we're thinking very hard about making the developer experience as fun and productive as possible, and error messages are part of that, but also the tooling and all the other kind of stuff. And when you were mentioning about JavaScript and you were putting semicolons at the end of some Python lines, pretty much everybody on the call was going, yes, I do that all the time, because we live in we're in this kind of like bastard world of it's kind of the web, but it's also Python as well. And sometimes you lose where you are. I have one question though, and it's about MicroPython.
Yes.
Were you using the next version of PyScript to test MicroPython? Right. Okay. Because MicroPython there's some nerd sniping about to happen. MicroPython has the FFI that Pyodide. It's not the same code. Damien's re-implement the same API. So if you use Next, MicroPython
I
should
see.
work. But if
I see.
it doesn't, and here's the nerd sniping bit, tell Damien, because Damien is a magnificent engineer. You know, if you tell him something doesn't work in his code, he's going to go, right, show me where the stack trace is and I'll fix it for you. So, you know, please test it with the next version and let us know how the FFI goes.
There is nothing in particular that requires Pyodide here. I am not actually using any feature of either Python or like I'm not downloading anything from PyPI here. Like it's just straight up Python.
Yeah. I mean, the other aspect of this, the story that's really interesting to tell is that you are kind of marrying this shotgun wedding of JavaScript and Python sort of thing. They're coming together, and it's a beautiful example of how we can take the best of the web and the best of Python and just smoosh it together and get this wonderful
because like, to be clear, I'm using 3JS, but there is no JavaScript line there. Well, I'm lying. There's like 5 lines because like classic PyScript doesn't really work like well with JavaScript modules, and now 3JS moved to be like, you know, JavaScript a JavaScript module. So I had to like hack it just a bit. You just like, you know, so like the global this sees the thing that, you know, like is imported by the module. Anyway.
Yeah. Awesome. Any more comments or suggestions or questions for Łukasz?
Well, the only question is, when are you going to put on PyScript.com so we can copy and mod it?
After Pi Week, like, you know, and when the voting is done, like, you know, kind of I can actually I have like a bunch of suggestions that people like gave me like on the game, but I'm like, now it would be kind of cheating since I'm on the web, so I could update the game. It would be updated for the people that play, but like I shouldn't, so I'm not touching it like until Pi Week is done, which is gonna be in 9 days, and then like we can put it on PyScript.com, we can put it on GitHub and whatever. So like should work. Like I made some work for it to actually work with the latest 3JS and not like, you know, some kind of historical version that just happened to be a little easier to use. So yeah, this should work with the latest and greatest.
On that point, please do let us know, because Chris, who's on the call, yes, he's there. Sorry, Chris is a professor of engineering at Tufts, and he's using PyScript with his students, and we're going to be seeing what they've been up to next week, I think.
Awesome.
But one of the questions Chris had was, could we plug in, say, for example, a Lego Spike Prime and use or use you know, accelerometers and things, so that we use the USB, you know, blah blah blah. So his students can use your code and then start plugging all sorts of goofy things in using the web APIs. So
so actually this is something that, like, you know, I don't want to hijack the meeting for this, but like, you know, like web USB is something that I couldn't get to work yet, but like, you know, kind of we need to make this work. Like I have like, you know, a bunch of like musical instruments that are kind of weird, and you know, kind of, and if we can make this work from a browser, or like, I know the people who make this, and I know other musicians who use this, and if I could make sequencers for them and synthesizers for them that they can just use by going to a website, like that would be fucking amazing. So yeah, web USB, we need this.
Yeah. Tell me about it. Chris has had lots of experience with web USB and web serial and things like that. So everybody who needs to hear your request is on the call, and we
Very
can
cool. Very
see what we can do with it. This is, like I said, we're all around the water cooler. So last but not least, Andrea, how was your last minute debugging going, mate? Are you ready for this demo?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I really did test last minute things, and first of all, I need to humble down, because the demo I've seen so far are super awesome and nothing compared to what I've been trying to fix in the last few minutes. But yeah, so one thing I'm sneaking in, not a question, rather status update about the fact that Python or PyDide needs the class.new. I know it's ugly in Python word, but it's the only way to disambiguate in the JavaScript one, because you have no issues in Python words about this. But in JavaScript, we used to have, and we still have actually, because backward compatibility is the foundation of the web, so they cannot break what was working before. We used to have functions, and function, it doesn't matter how you call the function, you can use new function, and that's a completely different paradigm and pattern and a way to create a new instance, because it inherits the prototype and the function gets its own context, which is this. So you cannot just invoke a function. And I had the discussion with one of the PyDide. We discussed this already. It's like, why do we need this? The convention of having Pascal case classes, it works somehow in JavaScript, but it's not a standard way to go. So when you invoke a function, actually PyDide has no idea if that's a class or not, because in JavaScript, there's no way to understand if something is a type of function. There's no way to understand if it's a class or not. So the plot twist of this story is that I actually filed to TC39, which is the standard body behind JavaScript. I've requested them to consider a new function.prototype.new so that any function can have a .new, which is an explicit intent from the user rather than just invoking a function. It's going to be like, I'm creating a new thing. And so I need to think about your feedback, because I understand from PyDide side, the class.new is ugly and it doesn't feel Pythonic at all. But at the same time, I'm thinking, how can the JavaScript be better there? And I'm trying to interact with this TC39 all of the time. When I find something ugly, I try to fix it. And my way to fix it was to propose .new to everyone. And at this point, I realized, ooh, maybe that's not what everyone wants. And so this is probably something I should consider, amend in the proposal, and follow up. So thanks for that feedback, because it's very important for the JavaScript mixed with Python or any other programming language, to be honest, ecosystem. So thanks a lot. That being said, my demo is, like I say, super simple, humble, and everything is just about a discussion we had recently. So let me start from sharing my screen, and let's hope you can all see, sorry, my Visual Studio Code or just Codium IDE. Can you see that?
Yes, we can see your Visual Studio Code.
Great. So long story short, we have this lovely fetch, brackets fetch API that is an array of possibilities that you can define what file you want to bring into your project. Either from a local URL or from a fully qualified URL like HTTPS, colon, dash, blah, blah, blah. It's fine. And this is the most simple use case, and it's apparently one of the most used one. And it's fine. It's totally fine. So what happened with the PyScript Next, or the current version of RC or release candidate technical preview, however we want to call it, is that we are writing also, we're improving also the documentation, thanks to Nicholas. And what Nicholas spotted is that to describe what it looks simple on the surface, it's actually more complex. And not by default, and that's the great effort we are taking to make user-friendly as much as we can. But the default is fine, but everything else is not fine anymore. So we need like 13 points to describe what's going on. And these are all the 13 points with nested case and sub-nested case and all this kind of stuff. And at some point, Nicholas wondered, hey, I'm trying to describe as much as I can this feature, which is a feature, to be honest, because it has a lot of hidden features behind the scene. But if you need all these points to describe that you want to fetch some source into your virtual file system, maybe it's a bit too much for our users. So that if we see what's fetch doing, it's cool. But if we see what's fetching doing behind the scenes, so this is a calculate fetch paths that I have in the project that is trying to understand what's going on with the fetch field. And actually, when I've implemented this myself, it was like, okay, I need some default escape. I need some to extract from config fetch some value. I have to compare a lot of things against undefined, because a lot of things can be undefined, throw errors if things are undefined, and finally merge a flat map of whatever is going on from to folder to files, and all these. And I heard this argument in this meeting already, is just you have to read a lot of documentation to understand what's going on for something. And we are trying to avoid as much as we can that situation. So we want to provide the best expectations out of the box and try to provide even more whenever it's needed. And here we have some code which doesn't look too convoluted, but I swear it was slightly more convoluted before. And we have join paths, which does something else. A lot of logic, literally a lot of logic to try to understand what the fetch config was. So Nicholas came up with a new suggestion, which is, how about we just do source target, and eventually, just because we want, and we can, eventually we can skip also the repeating name, so that we just say, hey, whatever file you want, just trash it in my root folder. And this is just a files field in the config. It's not brackets files, because it's enough to actually work for everything you like. And so it's a single field, it's a single parsing, and it's much easier to both write, understand, and it maps out of the box with this JSON, so that whenever you want to debug, what the hell was the config I passed along, it's going to be literally just this. So as a file field of the config, of course. So I'm just copy and pasting a B. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, this is the thing we've been discussing recently, and I thought, okay, I want this. I really want this in PyScript, and so last 15 minutes, I tried to implement something that was already discussed in this very same issue, and there was code, my own code, that already tested, and I was like, and you can see how much we discussed this to reach consensus of something on something that makes sense, and something that makes sense. You can see how much we discussed this, and this was actually my code. And I'm not sure I'm scrolling too fast, but basically this is the end goal. So we're gonna have a files, and you define in Tomo files like you can define template keys. That results into some string, and you can pass along those templates keys around to define your keys and values and whatever you want. And so here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 template keys, and then we have keys that work out of a previously defined template keys to define where the file goes. Okay, this is already way too complicated, but at the end of the day, and also this is like the feature that we are offering, but at the end of the day, all we want to do is a basic source equal target And we just added the simplification of templates to avoid repeating, especially long URLs like this one or any other long URLs you can find in this discussion. Yeah, so here, this was Antonio. Great idea. He wasn't sure it was a great idea. I thought it was, because you have just the from, you have a key, but how about the from key becomes hello, and I use the full qualified URL and I use the hello in the template to define either keys, or Jeff enters the chat, either keys or values. So we have a huge improvement in terms of simplicity for more advanced use cases where you don't want to repeat whatever you're doing as a server, and it's easy to just edit this part. And you just use the server.ini.py, but whatever, and you can decide to define other keys, and you have other keys in it. So yeah, today I just wrote in very few minutes, and I need to add tests and everything, but the code looks solid already. So in this case, I'm replicating whatever fetch here was doing, which is the most basic use case, but you can see it's already kind of smaller and simpler to explain and reason about. So here API is going to be trashed into whatever current folder API is, and BPy is going to be trashed in the same folder. And we have this lovely dot slash. If it ends with a slash, the destination, not the source, of course. If it ends with a slash, the destination, we just append the file. And I've tried this after building again. And the result, if I can actually grab my window, because Zoom is not helping me with that, the result is that everything works. So we have exact same file. So we had fetch HTML is doing this, and it's doing fetch toml, and fetch toml is this. And then we have files HTML, which is doing exactly the same as fetch HTML is doing, except is using, oh, okay, is using something, oh gosh. Now I'm gonna pray and see the same. Yes, it's using, sorry about that, but trust me, I tried this before properly, and is using the files toml at this point. The files tomls is the new version of fetch, so it's not an array of things. There's no unexpected things in there. It's always key value pair, and by key value pair I mean there's no undefined file to file. There's nothing to remember, literally. It's just key value pair. So source dest, source dest. If you define a key as a template, it's gonna be spread into the string whenever you think that template should fit or use or be useful for your end goal. And that's pretty much it. So I'm super happy. I'm not saying that maybe I want this project, which is the one fueling PyScript, to actually drop the previous the previous version, because that means that we need to move this version into PyScript to never break backward compatibility. But I think the current situation and the current discussion we had is super cool, and he brought us to a better place to be for configs and all this, especially for the fetch API. There's literally almost nothing to remember except 2 points. Source dest, write a key that is going to be a template with curly braces around, and that's going to be, if you put that curly braces around in your template, either source or dest, it's going to work. And that's it. I'm going to stop sharing because there's nothing else I should show.
Bravo. Bravo, Andrea. Valerio has his hand up.
I have a very quick question, actually. So I guess that the caveat is I've always been using the fetch files. I've never used any other kind of more sophisticated use case. So I was just like used files as a list, and that was very intuitive for me. So and honestly, I can see why you want to have more complicated use cases, but my sort of question to you now is, would you rather think that this solution is more verbose? So essentially it's not as quick and as easy to write as in writing a list of file names?
So the quick answer is that we're not enabling more convoluted use cases, is that you using the previous fetch API do not know how convoluted it can get when you want to address those more convoluted use cases. But at the end of the day, our agreement, I would say, is that we don't want to break backward compatibility. So you should be able to just update, use whatever brackets fetch you had before, and that should work. And your use case is also one use case we measured, like the most common one is the same I've shown, because that's super handy. It's super short and super easy to reason about. It's just grab the file from the exact web source code or folder I'm running my project and move it to the file system, and that I suppose, and I think that should be still granted, because that's probably the best use case and the best feature of fetch. So in its core, fetch is simple. It becomes less simple in all its kind of features. So the features are hard to explain, hard to remember, and that's what we're fixing. So when you need so many points to explain extra features, because we could say, hey, just bracket fetch your file that's gonna be in the virtual file system.
Mm-hmm.
That's easy. But everything else in the API and in the parsing and in the error reporting and in everything else, that's something that we thought, okay, maybe we can do better. And so because we are in release candidate times, we thought, how about we try to do better? And this is, I haven't pushed this, it's not public yet and everything else, but it works. And so I'm super happy, because there were a lot of conversations around this pattern. How can we make it easier? And
Andrea, I'm just looking at the time.
Yeah.
And
just 1 second, please. 1 second.
Yeah, okay.
1 second. If I can, if I might. So oh gosh, really? Okay, so this is what you had, and honestly, what we discussed is just about having these equal these. And if you look from this perspective, it's like the explanation for this fetch is source dest. And source dest is something you can always understand from copy and paste, from CP, from Linux world, but you don't really need to be a Linux user to understand the copy and paste paradigm. So you copy from a source and you push into a dest. If the dest is a folder, then it's gonna be the folder. If you wanna be explicit or change name, that's gonna be fine. There's nothing really to explain there. And so our concerns were more around providing an alternative that needs less explanations. And that's what I had to say extra. And I'm gonna stop sharing now.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to be bossy teacher mode engaged now. And so I'm going to cut people off if you're talking too much, because I want to get the 3 questions in. So apologies for that in advance. But Antonio, quickly, matey.
Yes, mine is actually a meta question, because in the issue we discussed it a lot, and from the perspective of PyScript developers, and we were saying, oh, people understand, people are confused, people like, people don't like, people want this or that. So I would like to ask the non-developers in the call what they think about the old fetch API, the new proposal, they like, they don't like, what are the impressions?
Who are the non-developers in the call?
I was going to say we're all developers.
No, the non-PyScript developers. Like, so Chris,
Okay, so
Lucas.
Chris has got his hand up. Chris has got his hand up. So Chris, take it away. What's your initial intuition?
I'm good at making things, not coding, man. I would love something where I could very easily put a list there of file names that are in my area, but file names that are also in Nicholas's area, and file names that are a remote site. So if this lets me just do quote/Nicholas/camera.py and call it camera2 or camera Nick, that would be awesome.
So everything on the web's a URL, including files in my project or in Lukasz's game or wherever else. The problem then becomes, how do we resolve what that URL is? So I know where to point my things. But once you've got a URL, you can tell it where the destination is in your file system, and it should just work. That's the whole point of this. Okay, so that pregnant pause leads me to Madhur, who is the only person remaining with his hand up because Fabio's put his down, maybe by accident, because I know Zoom's a bit tricky about this. But Madhur, you've got the floor now.
Yeah, okay. So apparently I missed the discussion, but it's a very basic or a noob question. But basically, how are you differentiating between assignment of a template variable versus using it in a string interpolation?
Curly brackets, that's it. If it's surrounded by curly brackets, it's the placeholder. Otherwise, it's a path in which you can have curly bracketed placeholders. Sure. Sorry, Andrea, I stepped in on that, but that's the answer. Fabio, I'm looking at the time as well. Fabio.
Yeah, looking at the time, I will be very quick. I just wanted to say that this is a great example of the approach that we want to take into supporting our users. Like, if it's not, it's hard to explain. It's probably not a great implementation or API, right? And we're iterating it.
Python.
Yeah, exactly. And then we can keep the fetch API and do an experiment or A/B test, whatever. See the feedback and choose the deprecate stuff and iterate there. That's as you know, without having followed all the discussions and everything. I think it's nothing, no changes from what we've been doing. I would say.
On that point about catching up, you're what, 10 days out of date? And I've sort of made me laugh inside just now because I imagined, well, by the time Fabio's caught up with everything that we've produced over the last 10 days, he's going to be 10 days away. So he's forever going to be 10 days past what we need to do. But you'll catch up. I just want to say, for those of us who were in that discussion, and I want to name Jeff, Andrea, Antonio, it was an absolutely, it was a superb discussion. It's how technical discussions should be. It was polite, it was conscientious, but it was deeply technical, and people were open-minded, and I think we got where we needed to a lot quicker as a result of that. So bravo for those people involved in that. Thank you for that as well. We're 4 minutes till time, so unless anybody has, I don't know, a time machine built in PyScript, I'm going to call this meeting to a close and stop the recording. This, as always, has been a wonderful meeting. It always makes me happy to see the goofy things, the clever things, the entertaining things that we all come up with. So if there's nothing else, I'll stop the recording now.